wrote something in one of your scholarly articles that I read, which really stood out at me, and so I wanted to make sure that I shared it. And it was very insightful for me in terms of how trust fits into negotiation. And what you wrote was that negotiators fear information imparted to the other will be used to their detriment. And so that's what we see as mediators a lot of times in negotiation, or if you're just the person negotiating, if there's not a sufficient level of trust, that you've got this fear that if I share too much, it's going to come back to hurt me. And we have to
Yeah,
overcome that as well. And
yeah,
I very rarely see that aspect of when we talk about mediations and negotiations and stuff, that aspect of how that plays out in the people that are negotiating. And so I thought it was an insightful phrase that I wanted to make sure that I got into this discussion.
well, thanks. And let me suggest that um, just to kind of bring something together from several pieces that you've mentioned. When as a negotiator, I try to be very aware of the trust barometer in the room. Not only do I trust them, but also do they trust me? Because, of course, the more I can help the other party trust me, the more likely we are to reach a deal, and the more likely we are to reach a deal from which I benefit. And since I'm that kind of negotiator, it's also the more I hope we'll be able to reach a deal that the other party benefits from also. So I'm very much aware of the trust barometer between the other party and me. Working as a mediator, I'd just like to kind of pin this concept for people to think. There's actually a trust triangle going on, right? There's the trust between me as the mediator and each of the parties separately. And then there's the trust between them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share that, and I know this is just my own view, and mediators have different perspectives of this. I try not to get too involved in the trust interaction between them. In other words, the conversation will always present opportunities for them to either trust each other, distrust each other, or not, right?
Right.
I am very careful not to put my finger on the scales in any way in that, because why would I? Because so I managed to get them to trust each other and solve and make a deal. But what do I know? I've just walked into their life, 8 minutes ago. What do I know about their history or about whether they will actually? So what I'm doing is it would be more like I'm using my office to kind of weigh in and say, no, this is something that I try to stay out of that and instead
Right.
focus, if anything, on opportunities for them to consider each other. But where I do, I'm constantly working is the trust relationships between the parties and myself.
Right.
Because if you work that, intentionally and mindfully enough, you'll be able to preserve the mediation environment
Right.
long enough for them to make good decisions about that third line in the triangle.
Well, it's interesting. I will have to give further thought about the idea of getting involved in their trust level with each other, because I think as I sit here right now, I see that a little bit differently, but I've not really ever considered it the way you've explained it. So I probably need some time to process that.
I'm
But
being very diplomatic. Lots of mediators don't agree with me on this point. That's fair enough.
no, I mean, I think it's a fair point, and especially because, like in the family law mediation, one thing that I do say is that I'm very comfortable allowing the parties have a very heated discussion with each
Yeah,
other in mediation, whereas other mediators are very quick to try to shut that down and are very uncomfortable with it. And I've become comfortable with it because I recognize that, um, like you said, I'm in their lives for a couple of hours, and if they are getting divorced, and chances are that they've got children, even if it's adult children, they are going to have future interactions. They need to be able to have those interactions. I can't
right,
shut it down and prevent
right,
them from having an
right.
interaction in the mediation just for this window of time. They have to be able to communicate with each other and feel that they said what they needed to say in order to get a resolution to this situation. So I do
Right, and
feel.
to bridge us, I'll just say that part of what goes on in that heated conversation that's exactly kind of what I meant by an
Right.
opportunity for them to gauge and make trust decisions vis-a-vis one another. It happens in and after those heated conversations.
Right. And I will also say that based on what you were saying, that what I can see is that by working a lot on the trust building between you and both of them, that's also increasing their trust in the process.
Absolutely.
And if they have trust in you and if they have trust in the process, you're maybe not going to get held up by the fact that there's some trust issues between them,
Yep.
because there's enough other trust going on for them that they will come to an agreement. And I think part of what's within what you said, and where I feel as a mediator I should be working, is that they are not always attuned to the trust barometer of the other person at that moment. And as the mediator, I can help them to become aware of the other person's, trust barometer, their level of trust, and whether it matches up with what they perceive it to be, and have dialogue around that, so that they're
Right.
not just thinking about their own, their inner needs, their wants, their ego, but they're also focused on, I have to understand the wants, needs, and interests of the other person, so that we can come to solutions that we both feel satisfied with.
Right. And sometimes it can be either kind of very covertly or gently, and you say, well, that sounds like something you should speak with each other about, or to very bluntly to say, look, you just admitted that you just told him that you took some of the marital assets and moved them into a separate bank account without him knowing about it, and now you're asking him for X to do X, Y, and Z, and it's very clear that he's expressing kind of distrust, and I don't need to be a genius or to understand that probably some of that distrust has to do with that, and you're going to have to overcome that
Right.
if you're going to have that. So, what would you like to say to him that would kind of address that trust issue? Like, so you're really going like that with it.
Right. Well, and
But then,
a lot of times that comes out more when we're in our separate rooms, our caucus,
sure,
and one of the things that I like to say, the person said, "Well, I want you to go in the other room and tell them," and I'll just say to them, "Well, how do you think that will go over in the other room?"
yeah,
And a lot of
yeah,
times I get an honest answer, and they say to me, "It's not going to go over well at all." And I say, "Okay, so do you still want me to go do that?" And sometimes they'll say, "Well, let's think about that some more," or sometimes they'll say, "Yeah, I do, and let's see what happens." And then I say to them, "Well, your homework is that while I'm over there having that conversation and we're expecting it to not go well, how are you going to respond when I come back and tell you it didn't go well?" And so, that's part of, understanding that trust barometer and what the other person's wants, needs, and interests are, and those sort of things. So,
and you
but
can you can to tie trust more directly, and you can just use the word trust. Parties will get it. They get it. You've done this, I know, but I'm just kind of since doing this well just needs intentionality. So a really good question to ask in those caucuses, in those private sessions, is just, when you offer this to the other party based on what we've seen, there's going to be a trust issue. You know,
right. And I've said that. Yeah,
why should
absolutely.
the other party trust you, or how are you going to make the other party trust you enough to do that? How are you going to show them that you are trustworthy? And something in the way you ask it or the way you challenge them will make it clear that you're not saying, how can you calm the other party? But it's, how can you show yourself to be the trustworthy person that you believe that you are and they're not seeing,
Right,
right?
right.
So
And that's
it's a very
right. And
ethical move.
that's the phraseology that's important, is that I'm sure the answer to this question exists. Just help me
Yeah,
to help them get there.
yeah, nice.